If you are someone who has that background of addiction or chronic illness or narcissism in your family, you may be someone who has experienced codependency all your life. And if that's the case, it's quite difficult to identify it. What feels like your thoughts are actually simply your reactions to other people. You don't yet know how to fully think and feel for yourself. I mean, it's truly mind trippy once you start to catch it, once you start to identify it. It's like going from intense fog to 100% visibility. But even if things are still foggy and you still can't tell just how codependent you are or how it's affecting you, you can still feel it. You can feel it in that simmering anger you have that you don't let yourself feel because you feel guilty and shameful for even being angry at this person. You can feel it in this sinking belief that things just don't work out for you. And I think most profoundly, you can feel it in that gaping hole inside of you, the one that feels like falling into an abyss. Anytime you think about leaving or them leaving, in these kinds of relationships, relationship doesn't feel like a choice. You don't really have a choice to be there. You feel compelled to stay because you're trying to manage the pain, theirs and your own. And so I think I'm in a codependent relationship. What do I do? Here's my response. So with codependency recovery, there's 2 layers to address. There's the original wound and all those behaviors and traits and emotions that manifest from that wound. In this video and the last, we've talked a lot about the latter, but we haven't really addressed that original wound. A common advice given to codependents is that they just need to set healthy boundaries. But boundaries will likely feel very surface level, or like you have to constantly enforce them until you address that thing inside that's calling you, that's pulling you, that's creating that compulsion to rescue the other person from their discomfort. And what I said to our friend on TikTok, which is what I'll say to you, is the illusion or the story that codependents are often living in is that I'm trying to please them, I'm trying to help them, I'm trying to make them comfortable, I'm trying to rescue them. But the reality is that we're actually trying to rescue ourselves. We find that position of not being pleasing, of other people not being pleased with us, of them being upset with us, of them thinking that we're selfish, of them criticizing us. We find that so painful and uncomfortable that we are doing what we can to make sure that we don't have to experience it. You are trying to rescue yourself from pain and discomfort. This compulsion becomes so strong that it can actually start to feel physically painful to result the patterning. Now, it's important to note the reason why we are so hardwired, right? Those of us who have intense, right? It's not just moderate codependency, it's quite intense. The compulsion to help, to please is so strong. Sometimes this comes from a genuine need for safety. If you're dealing with violent or narcissistic parents or partners, it's a way to protect yourself. And psychologically, even in the milder cases, it's also a way to protect yourself. But over time, this form of protection becomes self-destructive. We often know we need to recover because it is ruining our own lives. And so the first step in recovery, learning to work on you, for you, and not to save your relationship or even your partner. You're doing this for you. What I help with is helping you to heal that original wound, that part of you that finds it so very painful to set boundaries, to disappoint others, to not step up to the rescue. I help you create a felt sense of safety and belonging from inside, and a felt sense of love that comes from the inside. And if you're not in a relationship with a narcissist or abusive person, doing this work means that you then become a rock, a steady, secure rock for your partner. You get to demonstrate that your boundaries don't mean that you don't love them. If your partner has an insecure attachment style, you get to show them that your boundaries are not you distancing yourself from them. It doesn't mean that you don't love them. It's actually a way to make sure that the relationship stays loving and healthy. And so while as a codependent, our boundaries are reactive, they're often got a lot of fear wrapped up in them. And sometimes that is needed. So that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time, but as you're in that recovery stage and your relationship has the foundations, good enough foundations for this to become a healthy and secure relationship, you don't need to speak them or demonstrate them with anger. You actually feel very sovereign in your being, and that shift in your nervous system, you no longer need to wait until all the anger and frustration builds up and you speak your boundary in anger. You actually get to be so sovereign, and your partner feels this in your nervous system, can feel that you're coming from a place of calm. You're coming from a place of love. You're not actually pushing them away. You're just showing up for your own needs. And so when you remain steady and grounded, you can actually help your partner to regulate themselves as well. That is what we call nervous system coherence. It's very similar to how regulated parents are able to help their children regulate simply by keeping control of their own nervous system. They're able to stay calm, loving, and accessible, and that helps their child to not freak out. And so your partner will no longer associate your needs and your boundaries with pain, loss, anger, fear, abandonment, all the things that maybe they've learned in their own upbringing can come from distance or space. Boundaries will no longer feel like cruelty. They kind of start to feel like love. And so that's a typical journey of going from codependent in your relationship to interdependent, being able to meet each other's needs and acknowledge each other's needs. But ultimately, this all depends on what you are specifically dealing with. Like I said, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, that's a whole other, you're dealing with a whole other thing, and you're going to need time to understand what is actually happening in the relationship, the patterns of abuse, and you're going to need time to break any kind of cognitive dissonance that's formed or brainwashing from the victim blaming. And so it's going to take a different route if that's your situation. If you're in a more abusive dynamic, you're going to have to really get the support you need for that situation. There likely is not enough safety in that relationship for you to fully recover and remain in the relationship. But that is a personal choice each person who is in that experience must make. There's no shame. Maybe you're co-parenting because you absolutely have to, or you're dealing with some other extenuating circumstance that's unique to you, and you just know that this is the best choice for me right now. In those situations, you're likely going to have to learn coping mechanisms to withstand the abuse, and alongside your codependency recovery. And even then, you'll likely only fully be able to act from your recovered place with the other relationships in your life and not with a narcissistic or abusive partner. Healing is a journey. Like I said, there's no right or wrong if you decide to stay, or maybe stay for a period and leave later. But if you want support in parsing out, what am I dealing with? How do I get back to my own locus of control and center of wisdom so that I can make the best choice for me. That's why I'm here. So if you like to work with me one-on-one, I do have some private coaching spots available. You can learn more at uniquebelle.com/coaching. But I hope this was helpful. It is a lot to unpack and come to terms with. You may need to rewatch this video a couple times, as well as watch the first one. And this is actually a little series that I'm doing. So I've got some more videos coming up next week on how to recover and some of the tools that have worked the best for me. If you'd like to learn more about my offerings, go ahead and check out my website, uniquebelle.com. All the links to everything mentioned will be below. And like I said, I'll be back in just a few days with another video. So subscribe, like, and I'll see you there.